All right, so we learned yesterday this beautiful sikha of the Rebbe from Achrei Kadoshim in 1991, Tafshin Nun Aleph. And here the Rebbe really goes into this idea of what is going to be the future redemption. What are we praying for? We Jews, we're praying for. It's a second, right? The prayer, Go'al Yisrael, maybe Go'el Livnei B'neihem, to the Redeemer of the Jewish people. Right? There's going to come and redeem the Jewish people. Redeem. We talked about this. Redeeming is not exactly the best word, but that's the best we've got. Let's say free the Jewish people, free the potential of the Jewish people, and more exactly to free the potential, the good which is concealed in everything in the world. So we see a very, very, very basic principle of Judaism that's really, really stressed by Hasidic Judaism, and that is that this world is a really, potentially, a really good place. As it is actually, it's the worst of all. Here in this world, it's almost impossible not to do sins and to go against God. The whole feeling is one of egotism and separateness and sense of the world. Terrible, terrible. The world is awful place, right? Awful place, frustrating, cruel, painful, disappointing. The world, awful. But that's only because it's missing one little tiny element. And that is the letter Aleph. So this world as it is, with all of its negative things, is called Gola. Gola. Gola Shechina Itamam. Gola. Gola means the exile. Exile. Terrible thing. They had this story about when a person, what happens when a person is in exile? It's like being in prison. A person is in exile. It means he's the same person, but he can't do anything. Yeah, there was this famous story that put Napoleon into exile, a pretty stupid story actually, but they put Napoleon into exile. And it was supposed to be the second time, the first time he escaped, second they put him into exile, and he couldn't do anything. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't be a king. The first time they put him into exile, they gave him a little army. In any case, they put him into exile. He can't do anything, right? He's a king. He's a ruler. He's a genius. He's a master. He's a this and impressive, but he can't do anything. He can't rule, and he can't talk to anybody. He can't. So it's like a person being in a coma. That's what Gola is. That's what exile is. Exile. And Geula means you just put one little thing into it. It's like the difference between a person who's in a coma and a person that wakes up. What's it? The person is still there. It's the same person. Everything is there. Let's take even a more drastic example, a dead person and a living person. Let's say there's a person, God forbid, he drowned to death. Drowned to death. What's wrong? One second. Okay, good. A person, he drowns, right? So a person, he drowns, so his body is still whole. Everything is still there. Right? It doesn't take long for a person to drown, a few minutes or something like that. So the person's, everything is there. His eyes, his nose, his mouth, but nothing works. Nothing works. The doctors can do whatever they want to. They can give the shock and they try to get his heart started. Nothing works. All of a sudden, somebody comes and says, "What's missing with this guy? I mean, he's perfect. It's my friend. What's wrong with him? Look, everything is here. What's your problem? Why don't you let him go?" He says, "He's dead." He says, "Oh, what's missing? His soul. Oh, his soul. That's all that's missing. Okay, 1 second. That's it. The soul comes back. Guy wakes up. What happened? Soul came into his body. His lungs were okay. His brain was okay. His heart was okay. His liver was okay. His whole body was functional. Everything was working. Right? His endocrine system and his nervous system, everything was there. It's just they didn't have a soul. One little thing, you put one little thing, you can't measure the soul, you can't see the soul, right? You can't control the soul, but that's it. There it is. You put the soul in, it makes a person, right? The soul is not, you can't detect, you can detect what the soul does, but you can't detect the soul itself. So it's almost the same type of a thing. So that's what the Rebbe says. The word exile is missing one letter, Aleph. You put that one letter Aleph in and it becomes Geula. It becomes redemption. becomes, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, right? A person is dead, so throw him in the garbage. Throw him in the garbage. We have his pictures, we have his records, we have his memory, right? His soul is floating around. No, you have to put the soul into the body. That's what we want. We want a real, living, meaningful, physical world. The goal of Judaism is not to go to heaven. There is such a thing as heaven, but that's not the goal. That's an interim place. In a way, it's a sad place. That's why people cry. When someone dies, a big tzaddik, a holy person, he dies, well, everybody's crying. Why cry? Be happy. He's going up to heaven. You should be happy. There are people that do that, actually. Going up to heaven, he's in a better place now. It's true. I mean, this world is a really terrible place. But on the other hand, here is where God wants. Okay, so it says, that's what it says. That's why we can understand that the whole idea of the Geula, that's why we can understand the whole idea of this redemption is even the highest thing. It all depends on just putting an aleph. The future redemption, like we said in the beginning, there's not going to be any changes. It's just there's not going to be any war. There won't be any difficulties. Right? There's enough land in the world to if we can just get peace. There's enough land to settle 1,000,000 times more people than there are in the world. You know how much land there is in the world? All the deserts and the tundras, Russia itself, I don't know, thousands of square miles, empty. Even in Israel, I would estimate maybe 1% of Israel is settled. I don't know. I have to look and see. There's deserts and there's mountains. There's this. So but we have to reveal the potential in the world. And that's what it means putting this aleph, putting the aleph into the world, into the gola, into the exile, into the state of unconsciousness that we're in. That's why it's so evil, so terribly evil. These people who are saying that there's too many people in the world. I hear that and I just shudder. I just can't. I don't know why everybody else doesn't shudder. And these guys are ruling the world. I can't understand it. I mean, you look at people's eyes. Everybody's eyes are the same. Look at a child's eyes, right? The eyes of everybody are the same color. Look at purple people's hearts. The people, I can't imagine. I just can't understand it. I mean, every person is just such a miracle, and it's just a storehouse of wealth. Maybe the only exceptions are these guys that are saying that there's too many people in the world. Maybe we could do without them, but I don't think so. Anyway, so we have to just bring out the good that's in the world. This will bring about the future redemption. Kafi, like it says, the word geula comes from the words gola and aleph. What is this aleph? We're going to see this is God. Aleph. A lot of things. Aleph stands for aleph. Light, or emuna, faith. Bakal inyani geula. The whole thing of this geula, this redemption that we're all waiting for, it all elevates the entire creation. In other words, we want the world to be, or the world is potentially a wonderful place, much better than heaven. We haven't seen it yet. That's what we want Moshiach for. Moshiach is going to come and teach everyone to think positively, be positively, act positively, do what God wants positively. Okay, but how are we going to do it? Here it is. Now the Rebbe is going to tell us what to do, me and you. Ready? The explanation is what it says in the Mishnah. First Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that we're going to say this Shabbat. Pirkei Avot. This Shabbat. Remember last Shabbat we had Rebbe said, Eze Derech Yashar Al Adam. Remember we said Rebbe, that the Mashiach was Rabbeinu HaKodesh. They said he could have been Mashiach. And we said that you have to do Torah, you have to do the commandments, Rachel. Remember we learned last week? This week is the third chapter of Pirkei Avot, right? Religious Jews, they say this tractate called Pirkei Avot, the chapters, the teachings of the great rabbis, the fathers, they're called. The teachings of the great rabbis. And there's 6 chapters, and we learn every week, we learn another chapter. Well, this chapter, this is the third week. This is between the Passover and the giving of the Torah and Shavuot. And a lot of people learn it, we also do in Chabad, until Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but in any case, this week is the third week. So it says, it says, look at three things and you won't come to do a sin. And what does it say over there? It says, look at three things and you won't come to do an Avera. Where you come from, where you're going, and who's going to judge you. That's what it says. Look at three things, you won't do a sin. What are the three things? Where you come from, where you're going, and who's going to judge you. Where do you come from? You come from a little drop, a seed. Where are you going? You're going to be eaten by worms. Who are you going to stand? You're going to be standing in front of God. Okay, the simple question is, what does the Mishnah have to tell you? Look at three things. Just look at, you can see that there's three things, right? It should have said, look at the fact you came from a seed, and you're going to be eaten by worms, and you're going to be judged by you don't know it's three things. So it says, no, then when it says, look at three things, this is a separate teaching. Afterwards, it continues and it says, what are these three things? You should know where you come from, where you're going, who you're going to give judgment. The question obviously is, why do you have to have a number? Minyan alamali. Why do you have to say there's three things? Any fool can see that there's three things. Manogea, why do we have to tell that there's three things? Just say what the things are. You should know you come from a fetid drop, it says, and you're going to be eaten by worms after you die, and that you're going to be judged by God. So what do you have to do? Look at three things. It says, even if you want to say that the number is important, so why do you have to tell what the number is? Each one, everyone can count on their own what the number is. So we can say it's very simple. That the Mishnah is saying, look at three things. It's saying, the Mishnah is Davar Katzar. The Mishnah are always saying very short things and that contain a lot of information. Ein kavanato doesn't mean just to say the three things that are talked about afterwards, where you come from, where you're going. But gam le'inyan, the shlosha devarim clause, saying you should always look at three things. What are the three things? That's a different topic. In addition to that, you should also always look at where you come from, where you're going. The Mishnah is telling us you always have to look at three things. Everything you do, you have to look at three things. What are these three things? A person has to look at, first of all, three things. And by means of this, he won't come to do any sins. A person might think, a person, a religious person, right? You might think, I have to look at two things, right? First of all, you're a normal person. You live your life and you think to yourself, maybe there's God. Maybe I should do what God says. Maybe there's right and wrong. Maybe I'm here for a purpose. Maybe life is just not totally meaningless. I'm not a product of nature. And maybe the soul has a value to it. Maybe it's something, but you start to think, wow, maybe there's God. And then you start to realize, wow, maybe it really is. There really is God. And then you start to feel that, this sort of really makes sense, that there's God. So therefore, I am going to be a good person and I am going to live my life for the Lord. Who? Me, and there's God. That's enough. Anini vresi l'shamish es koni, like it says in the what is it in the Mishnah in the end of Kedoshim. I was created in order to serve God. No, that's good. That's a nice person. He's always thinking about God. Two things, me and God. Omer Mishnah, the Mishnah says you always have to look at three things. What are the three things? It's not enough that you just think about you and God. Adam tzarich lidbonen. You have to look and also see three things. What are the three things in addition to the fact of himself, me, and God? There's also a third thing. What's the third thing? The world. The world that's being created by God. The world is important. Your job is not to get out of the world. But only by means of the world can a Jew, and eventually the whole world, all mankind, but Jews first, can serve the Creator. When you go to heaven, then you get pleasure. and you can't serve God. You're just sitting up there basking. It's like, like how do you say, the old folks home, or the veterans home or something like that. Guy is 100 years old. He's got all these medals, and he's getting a free coffee all the time, watching television. And they say, would you like something more, Mr. Brown? You say, yeah, I'd like something more. I'd like to be 25 years ago and out in the battlefield. That's what I would like, right? I want to be active. You go to heaven, it's like sitting in the old folks home. You just sit up there and you receive. You receive, oh, you did a nice thing. You get a big reward. You do this. That's you and God together. Says the Rebbe, not for me. I want to be in this world. In this world, I'm not thinking about what I receive. I'm thinking about serving my Creator. In this world, I'm out on the battlefield. Tachlit Briat Olam, the whole purpose of the world and the coming of the soul below in the body is she'en, and there's this world. There's nothing lower than it. Lamata mimenu, it is. Listen, a person that goes to hell, right? You figure hell is the lowest place. No, it's not. Hell is not the lowest, because you know at least that there's God. You know that you're not the boss. Right? At least you're not making any more mistakes down there. Here in this world, you can think, I'm the boss. You can be a religious Jew, etc., and you can just flip out, right? And say, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to feel what I want. I'm going to think what I want. I'm doing all the. We just learned that with the Ramban, in the Ramban yesterday. We talked about it. I want to be in this world with all of the difficulties and all the problems, the melota takavana, to do what God is creating the whole business for. Why is God creating the world? Why is He creating me? This is what Chassidus Chabad says. That God wants that He should have a dwelling in this physical world. Here in this physical world was the Holy Temple. Why was the Holy Temple here? What, free samples to tell you what it's going to be when you go to heaven? To induce people to think only about heaven? No. The Holy Temple was here because it shows what God wants. God wants to be here. And people, when they went to the Holy Temple, what did they feel? They felt inspired to do more for the Creator. They didn't go to the Holy Temple just to feel the pleasure. They came to feel happy. They were happy to be able to do what God wants. Yehudi, that a Jew, by means of his serving God, Yevor v'yizachech gufo, he can purify and refine his body and his natural soul, and even the physicality of the world. V'lasot mikol zeh, and he can make for this whole world dira l'kodesh baruch hu, a dwelling for God. That's what we said, to take the gola, the exile, and just put the letter aleph in it, right? When the letter aleph, that represents the oneness of God, then that's Geula. Geula is in the middle of Geula, middle of this terrible world. All of a sudden, one little thing flips it around, right? Like putting a soul into a dead body. The guy's dead body, all of a sudden he's going to, if you wait a little bit longer, he's going to start to smell. Put him in the ground, get rid of him. Right? You got to get him out of here. No, you put a little soul in him, all of a sudden, whoop, he comes alive, and he's smiling, he's laughing, and he can sing, and he can dance, and he can give ideas, and he's productive, and he's inspiring. Just you put a little soul into him. All we have to do is put this aleph into the world, and this makes the world into the better than any of the heavens can be, because this world is where we serve God. How do we make this happen? By doing Torah and commandments in this world. That the majority of the commandments are physical things. And by means of doing the commandments with physical things in the world, this purifies and refines the physical item which is being used to serve God into a vessel for godliness. That's the idea of the Holy Temple. And then a person, so to speak, makes himself into the Holy Temple and makes the whole world into the Holy Temple. But the only way to do this is by means of the Torah. Take an example, giving charity. The charity, it says, is equal to all the other commandments. The main commandment of all that a Jew, when he takes from his own efforts and works and the money that he earned, mikaspo agashmi, his physical money, that he earned, and he gives this to a poor person by means of That by means of this, he gives it to a poor person. Well, he's really not giving it to the poor person. He's doing a commandment, and he's giving this life to God. He's giving the money, the life and the connection to money. People know how crazy people go for money. He's giving this. That's the third thing. That's the third thing that we always have to look at. Namely, what? Not just God and not just us, but to make God live here in this physical world. This is not a secondary thing. It's not a side thing. That the main thing is to go to heaven, and that the way to do it is by serving God. No, it's not a side thing. The main thing is not me. This is the whole entire purpose of creation, of the connection between God and man that's serving. Since that God himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the creator of the whole business, he desires that to have a dwelling place in this physical world. And this is Kol Adam, this is the whole entirety of man, the Tachlit Briato, and the whole purpose of his creation. And the whole purpose, the reason why we are here in this world, is to make God a dwelling place in this world. And it's so important, this physical world, this is important to us, that we must look at three things, not just ourselves and God, but the world also. You read it, Neshama, that's why the soul came down into the world by means of God. Namely, despite the great highness of the souls, what do we say? The Jewish souls, the sons of God, every Jewish soul. And we said the soul that you put inside of me, Tahori, it's a prayer we say every morning. The soul that you put inside of me, God, is pure. And there's no place for anything that's not pure. And God takes the soul and sends it down. Like we say in that same prayer, the soul is pure. And ata barata, ata yatzarta, ata nafachtabi, that God, you put it down into the world of Bria and Yetzira and nafachtabi, in the physical world. Until this actual physical world, that in it there is at the chayim vet tov, at the derech, in this world there's good and life, and there's the opposite. A person can defile himself and, God forbid, choose the opposite of life. Why did God put the soul down here? In order to fulfill this inner intention of God, that God wants a dwelling place in this physical world. It says the Rebbe, but first, 1 second, let's look at this. This seems to be the opposite of what God's supposed to be good. Why does God put the soul, the bringing of the soul down into the body? And this is the opposite of, so to speak, the nature, the definition of God. God is supposed to be the essence of good and kindness. Umiteva hatov la'etid. And the nature of something good is to only do good. Because God should have made it that the soul just stays up in heaven and it gets higher and higher. Therefore, God takes the soul, and here we're saying, no, what does God do? He takes the soul and he puts it down into this terrible world from an Igra Rama, Labira Mirta, from a high mountain to a low, deep pit in this world. Why would God do a thing like this, which seems to be the opposite of godliness? So it says, from this we can understand the gadol ilui v'chesed avoda d'asiyas dira b'tachton. Now we can understand the great kindness that God has done with us to make a dwelling in this physical world. Because of this, it was worthwhile to take the soul and put it down below in the world. Not just for the sake of the soul itself. The soul itself doesn't have to be fixed up, but in order to fix up the body and the animal soul. Therefore, God put it into the world in order to make a dwelling place in this low world. So what are we talking about? God took the Jewish people, his only son, the Jewish people, and he put the Jewish people into this terrible low world where there's full of suffering and terrible things. Why would he do a thing like that? Because by means of this descent into the world, and the soul elevates the world in order to be a dwelling. What are we preaching? We're preaching this world is a good place. You want to go to heaven? Leave that up to God. Forget it. Don't think about it. It just becomes a big ego trip. The whole world becomes an ego trip if you think about going to heaven. That means you only think about two things, me and God. You have to think about a third thing. And this is the essence of creation, that God wants to have a dwelling in this physical world. And this can only be done by the soul, the essence of the soul coming down into the physical world. This reveals the essence of God here. Until this highness is drawn down, even the soul itself. The soul itself gets an extra, a medal. The soul itself reaches to a higher level of surrender to the creation. A gila, the essence of the soul is revealed. This is revealed by means of making a dwelling place in the physical world. That's why we see, I mean, it's a terrible thing, but Jews have given their lives for Judaism since Abraham. So if the story of Abraham, it says that there's midrashim and things like that, but he's thrown into a fiery furnace, and Moses, there's stories about Jews, and you don't have to go so far away. There's Hannah and her 7 sons that they were all killed, and we have millions of people, Jews, that were killed in the Holocaust just because they were Jewish, no other reason. Only reason, just because they were Jewish. And in the Crusades and in this, right, and the Inquisitions and the expulsions of Jews, only because they were Jewish. They were willing to give their lives and not deny their Judaism. The Holocaust was a sort of exception, if you want to call it. They say that Hitler was the only one that didn't give the Jews a choice. Up to that, all the Crusaders and all these other people, they gave them a choice. You change your religion, we'll let you go. And Jews said, Shema Yisrael, I'm not going to do it. Why? What did they get out of it? What did they possibly get out of it? So because the Jewish soul, suddenly he realizes its essence, the essence of the Jewish soul. And he just can't go against God. He realizes I'm one with God. I can't go against what God wants. The Torah is the essence of God. He's trained, the Jew is trained not to think about going to heaven, not to think going to heaven. So why was he give his life? He'll give his life in order to go to heaven, right? No, he doesn't think about that. What is he thinking about? The truth. Suddenly he's connected to the essence of his soul. According to this, we can understand what it says in the Mishnah. Look at 3 things without considering the soul of a Jew, that the Jew is called a portion of God from above. Mamash. This is explained in the 2nd chapter of the Tanya. It should be the service of a Jew should be, in addition to the fact that he is making the world a dwelling place and revealing his soul, it should also be, you have to look at 3 things. You have to make a dwelling place for God where? In the world. The world itself has to become a dwelling for God. And by means of this, it reaches a person to himself too. This adds completion and wholesomeness to the person himself. Because this is the whole reason that the world was created and that we're created. And even though that according to this is a tremendous descent externally and temporarily, and a person has to be in this world where there's all sorts of sins and temptations and difficulties, by means of forgetting about all this and thinking only what does the Creator want, those thoughts of what does God want, that makes you into a holy temple. Just like in the holy temple, God was revealed totally in the Holy of Holies. Nobody could see it. But it was there, the same thing when you are in a difficult, a challenging situation and you think, what does God want? It's in your mind. You think thoughts of Torah. That itself elevates the world. It makes a little bit of light in a dark place. By means of that, you won't come to do a sin. A person thinks, why am I in this terrible world? Why? Because in order to transform the world, to do the impossible. By means of by your service, he makes a dwelling in this world, looking at 3 things. By means of this, you don't come to do any sins. You don't even come to the hands of sin, even to the possibility of thoughts of doing a sin. Looking at 3 things. So we'll talk about this more, God willing, tomorrow. And like I say, tomorrow, it could be, if you tune in and you see that I'm not here, it means that I made the class and you'll have to go on online and look at the past classes. And then you'll see the classes that I made in the morning, because I still see the whole thing with my car. Okay, ready? Yom Yom. The Rebbe made a lot of what's called shluchim. He sent a lot of emissaries, representatives of himself. It says the representative of someone is like the person who sends him. This is like an angel. An angel, when an angel comes down to do something in this world, is called God's name. The angel is called God. If this is the name, because he's a total representative of God. If it's with an angel, certainly the soul. The soul, in fact, is more of an emissary than even an angel. Now, Hasidim, they are emissaries and representatives of the Rebbe. The first Rebbe. All the Rebbes are the same Rebbe, actually. So if a Chassid actually does what he's supposed to do, then he's connected to the Rebbe. He's bound up with his whole being. Everybody says, this is a Chassid. There's an eats a Chassid. There sleeps a Chassid. Right? You can see the person. In Israel, they say, are you Chabad? Oh, Chabad is different. They see that because you're a representative of the Rebbe, the Melech HaMashiach, to make this world into a beautiful and meaningful place. Have a good day with Mashiach now, and I'll see you tomorrow. Either you'll see the Zoom messages that I put up. You'll have to look in the past, or we'll have an actual class. But today at 3 o'clock, we're learning again. Have a good day with Mashiach now. Shalom Uvracha.